Hello, everyone. Welcome to ComLead Connects 2025. This event is produced by Communication Leadership Master's Program at University of Washington at Seattle. I'm Ekin. I'm a faculty member and the director of the program, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague Anita, who is a faculty member, long-term faculty member of our program and artist in residence. So we're going to facilitate a 2.5 hour wonderful learning event for you all, for you to think about what matters now for communication and marketing professionals. We all know that we're in a really complex world globally and nationally right now, and trying to make sense of all the changes and all the different things that are impacting our work is more important than ever. Our master's program offers wonderful classes to professionals in communication, content, and marketing fields, but every year we take this event, Connects, as a way of connecting to you all in the public, our alumni, those who are communication and marketing professionals around the country, around the world, as well as our students and faculty as well. This program is produced by one of our classes, actually master's classes. They're there right now. Hello to the class who's producing it. It's just a testament to the applied learning that we do in our master's program. So this class is producing a world-class event for us today, and they'll be listening to us and doing all the production throughout the day. Again, the topic today is what matters now, and we have wonderful speakers. We'll introduce them throughout the day as well, but we are going to think about very many important topics that relate to communication and marketing professionals today, from understanding the state of trust at this moment to thinking about the role of internal communications, how we relay what we're doing to our teams at work, to thinking about how to think about branding and how to relate to audiences, particularly Latino populations in the US, from a really thoughtful overview. And then last but not least, thinking about the power of narratives and how organizations can leverage narratives to better relay their messages to various constituents. So it's a day packed with inspiration and learning. Anita, great to see you today.
Oh, it's so good to see you too, Ekin. Hello.
Wonderful to have you. So I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about, the experience, because again, it's a learning event and we want to recognize our learners learning and then also engage them, not just today, but after the event as well.
Absolutely. I mean, Connects has always been something that we prize as being a very interactive event. And so today, these topics that you've just shared are going to be ones that we get to hear from the speakers, but then we've built in opportunities for everybody who's on this call to be able to join, share their ideas. We'll have a robust Q&A. But what's really exciting is you've all gotten the mini syllabus. We really see this as a miniature salon and class. And that syllabus was put together with lots of care. Many of the readings, many of the articles that were part of that mini syllabus have been gathered from the speakers today. And Ekin and I also put in some of our favorites. And then we're also very committed to this being something that you can share moving forward as something you've completed. So there's a learning badge that will be made available. That will be part of a reflection exercise that all participants will be encouraged to participate and complete after the event. And then that learning badge becomes something that showcases this continuing education that you're all participating in today with this really crucial topic. So we make that learning badge free. We believe very, very deeply in the accessibility of this event to all, and really I'm so looking forward to all of our speakers today.
Exactly. We're seeing the learning badge in the screen. They will have
Yes.
until March 14th, so you can watch a recording. If you're watching a recording, you're not too late to complete the questions about today's event and related to your experiences. And then receive this badge to share on LinkedIn or other professional profiles, as Anita shared with us and issued by our master's program at University of Washington. This is an interactive event too, Anita. I'm really excited for, I'm already seeing a lot of comments. They're coming on our screen too. If you're tuning in through YouTube, again, as you have started to see that the comments you share, and hello Angela, for instance, good to have you with us. One of our alums joined us today. But again, all of you, no matter where you're joining us from, share with us where you're joining from, who you are, and then also throughout the event, we will have Q&A at the end. But you can also share questions through YouTube, as well as again, you can use LinkedIn too. You can follow Communication Leadership on LinkedIn. And we will also be live casting. This event is live there right now. And you'll be able to access the recording in both platforms after this event as well. So just a note for you all. I just wanted to share that. And then another thing that we're going to be doing, and we're going to practice it together, is for those of you who are joining live, thank you again for joining us today. We're going to make this event interactive. So in between talks, we're going to ask questions, and we're going to use Mentimeter platform to engage you. And I'm just going to ask you to actually scan this code and join us now, because we're going to share with you all our first question. Again, in between all talks, we want to also check your beat and your thoughts and your experience with the topics. So I want to start with our very first question. I'll just wait a few more seconds for everyone to join Mentimeter, but then we'll share our very first question, and I want you to start thinking about that too. Our very first question will be asking you all to identify one communication challenge in top of your mind right now. Anita, it's a very particular moment, right? I mean,
Yes.
for many years now, we've been thinking about communication, what matters now, what to highlight. But it's definitely a moment, again, where we have to think through a lot of different things happening.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this. I recently read an article by Derek Thompson in the in the Atlantic, and it's actually part of our mini syllabus. And in that article titled "The Antisocial Century," he references this fascinating psychological study that was done by the University of Chicago, where they encouraged commuters to talk to strangers, and then they looked at how people felt after engaging in conversations with someone they didn't know during their commute. So what I'm thinking about right now is, how can I take that maxim of don't talk to strangers and turn it on its head and really engage with my community and the way that I walk in the world. And so I'm really thinking about that study, because people felt so much better after just engaging in those conversations with the world around us, the people around us. And I think that that's one of the things that moving forward, I'm going to be thinking a lot about today. How can I talk to strangers? How can I build that community?
Exactly. And for me too, in my communication practice, something that I've been thinking about, I actually also added to the mini syllabus a book that I've been reading and I loved, by Graham Alcott, called Kind, The Quiet Power of Kindness at Work. And I've been thinking about how to be kind and how to think about kindness in communication as a communication standard, as we hear a lot about in internal communication and external communication, how we can come across. And in this moment, I think a tone that's kind, and we can think about it with generative AI and tones too, and what that really feels like and how we can standardize and kind of advocate for that has been on my mind. And that really matters, I think, for me. Talking to strangers for sure, right? How can we hear more perspectives? But then also I'm thinking a little bit about how can we insert more kindness into our communication, branding, and other practices that we do at work. And we're seeing also poll results. We're seeing, again, we'll
Yes.
do it in each part, from public trust to misinformation to authenticity to engagement to chaos to government to politics, right? There are a lot of things on our mind. So let's start with our very first kind of situating talk. I'm really excited for this talk. I'm excited for all of them. This is going to be amazing. I was able to convince, and I'm so excited for him to join us, a long-term partner of our program and a member of our advisory board, Jonathan Jordan, who I know, Anita, you'll introduce in a minute. Jonathan and I had deep conversations about trying to make sense of what matters now in previous meetings. And we've been talking a lot about state of trust, but then also this year's trust barometer, which is, in its 25th edition, reads very differently. It's we discussed, Jonathan and I discussed that it's a little bit grim, but it has a lot of kind of clues as to what matters now for communication and marketing professionals. So I wanted to invite Jonathan for an exclusive conversation to situate us and start us off today. Jonathan will join us just for this address. So we are so thankful for Jonathan's time to give us an overview of some key findings from this year's Trust Barometer, which I think is like none other in recent years. I'll turn it over to you, Anita, to introduce Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Ekin. As I echo everything you said, I'm so excited we've got JJ here today. So, without further ado, Jonathan JJ Jordan is a seasoned communications professional who currently serves as head of U.S. corporate reputation and general manager at Edelman, California. Before joining Edelman, JJ worked at Ernst & Young, Booz Allen Hamilton, and Slalom Consulting, where he specialized in enterprise transformation, communication, and change management. In 2021, JJ was named to PR Week's 40 Under 40 list. We're fortunate that JJ also serves on the advisory board of the Communication Leadership Program. And today, as Ekin just said, we're excited to have JJ's insights on the Edelman 2025 Trust Barometer and lessons organizations across all sectors can take forward. JJ, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
I am honored to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction. And just excited to see all of the folks from around the world that are a part of this thing. This is really, really fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. JJ, we're going to turn it over. I can't wait to hear your perspectives in length, and I can't wait for our audience to also learn from you today what's happening with the state of trust, Edelman's most cherished kind of input to our world that we all think with, and I can't wait to learn from you.
Awesome. So we have a lot to share. There's a lot of slides. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. All right. So, as mentioned before, look, this is the Edelman Trust Barometer has been around for 25 years. This is actually a really important year for us. This is the 25th version of this study. And this is IP that at Edelman we give away. We believe trust is the most important currency for brands today. And I would say even more importantly, trust is key. I was noticing some of the things that were top of mind for all of you as you were populating your answers to that initial question. And misinformation, disinformation, fake news, all of those things came up. And so for the various brands and companies that we work with, trust is becoming more and more important every day. A couple things. We launch this every single year at Davos, so this is sort of hot off the press. This was launched in January. It's always a staple IP that people look forward to. And again, this is our 25th year, so we've been studying 4 institutions over the last 25 years. So when we think about trust, you can think about what are the states of trust in general. This is a global report, and I'll share some of the methodology in a second. But as you think about globally, what are the states of trust from the general population around the world for 4 institutions? Those 4 institutions are business, government, media, and NGOs. And so throughout this deck, you're going to see a lot of numbers, a lot of data. If there's a slide that resonates with you or that you think would be helpful, this is all available at edelman.com. Please go get it. We don't charge for this. We give it away because we think it's that important. But just a bit of a warning, there's a lot of data on these slides. But we believe that you can't make decisions about reputation or your brand without having an informed position and an informed POV. So with that, let's jump right in. So I mentioned there are many different fluctuations that happen based on what happens in the world. And so this slide talks about where we started the study back in 1999 with the Battle of Seattle. Some of you were around for that. Some of you may not have been around, but this was a moment in time where there were a lot of protests happening, anti-globalization movements, and it sparked an interest in our CEO, Richard Edelman, to try to look into what's going on and what is the state of trust. So this was the initial year that we launched Trust. And we found that NGOs to be the most trusted institution across those 4 institutions. Fast forward to 2023 or 2003, we had the invasion of Iraq. And we saw there, again, pretty big fluctuations in levels of trust. And so government saw some declines there. Fast forward to 2008, where you had the financial crisis. And we saw business, and in particular, financial services as a sector, lost a lot of trust. Fast forward to 2016, where you saw some of that, the populism movement, and you saw Brexit. In 2020, we had COVID, and fast forward to 2022, you had the invasion in Iraq. Each one of these moments, we've seen various fluctuations in the amount of trust. And the takeaway is today is pretty shocking that business is still, over the last several years, business is the most trusted institution. Which for me, in B school, we had to take this class called Corporate Social Responsibility on the backs of Enron and these big movements that happen in business where business became distrusted. So it's just fascinating to see that business, as of today, is still the most trusted institution. We include this slide definitely for our academic presentations because we have a lot of smart brainiacs on this call and they probably have a lot of questions around the study. But this is a very rigorous study, 28 countries, over 33,000 participants. And something that I would look for, and this was fielded at the end of last year, but when you see off to the right of the slide, you'll see that little teal circle. That is anything that is statistically significant or a significant change year over year. And what you'll find in the following slides is there are a lot of significant changes that we've seen in the last past year. All right, so we talked about how the takeaway, I wish that I had really good news for you. And there are things that we can do about the state of trust around the globe, but it is a sobering message. And so the next maybe 10 slides, they're pretty grim. If we take a step back and we think about the last few years of the report, and if you've been following, there have been substantial societal fears for many years. Fears around the state of politics, fears around the state of the economy and inflation, fears around technology and the implications on society and the implications on individuals and their employment. There's been a lot of fears. Maybe about a couple of years ago, that fear began to materialize in what we called polarization. And we see it in the news, we hear about it, but it actually showed up in a substantial way in our data. So this notion around polarization and there being sort of a 0 or 1 or a zero-sum game in terms of these societal issues, those fears moved into polarization and tribalism. And this is the first year where we actually started to see what we call grievances. What is a grievance? A grievance is when an individual or a group of people, make a complaint about something they feel is unfair or unjust. And so this notion around grievance, you're going to see this in the following slides, but we've now teetered into what we would call grievance. Okay, so what are some of those things? What's some of the data that's backing this thesis? So first, there is still persists to be a considerable lack of optimism globally around the future generation. So only 36% of people globally feel like the next generation will be better off than today. And if you zoom in and you think about the developed countries, so those bars that are dark, for the bars where you see that dark bar, those are developed countries. And within those developed countries, only 1 in 5 people say that they feel like the future is actually going to be better off. So there's a considerable concern about the future and that will they be better off in the next generation? Will they be better off than today? If we zoom into income, and so this slide, there's a lot going on, but the top graph that you see across is the top 25% of income earners globally. And that bottom is the lower 25%. And there is a trend around those that are higher earners to be more trusting of those 4 institutions that we talked about. But we continue to see considerable distrust from those that are lower income earners and their levels of trust. And if we think about that distrust or that reddish, pink, orange, whatever that color is, if you look at NGOs, government, and media, they are distrusting. And then they're neutral when it comes to business. But there's certainly a difference of opinion, a difference of sentiment globally from those that are higher earners and their levels of trust in the institutions and those that are lower income earners. Another stark takeaway that we saw this year was that trust or fears or concerns or worries in positions of leaders is really at an all-time high. So this notion around government leaders or business leaders, your CEOs, your executives, and what was really interesting is journalists and reporters. At an all-time high, there are considerable folks that said they worry about what those folks, or they worry about the levels of trust in those individuals, but specifically some of them even saying that they feel like these leaders or these positions of authority purposefully mislead people, and in some case will share or state things that are false or gross exaggerations. This was a really, really interesting slide. There's a couple that just like made me sort of, my jaw dropped as I saw them. This is another all-time high slide. The amount of folks globally that worry about experiencing prejudice, discrimination, and racism across the board, regardless of demographic, are at all-time highs. So just overall, we saw a 10% jump year over year of folks that worry about these. But if you zoom into each of these demographic areas, so regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of income level, and even if you zoom into racial identity or ethnicity, even with white and Hispanic folks saying that they worry, I mean, those are pretty big jumps of folks that say they worry about prejudice, discrimination, and racism. It's incredibly concerning, and you have to wonder what's really causing this. So the next, you're going to see throughout these slides, we've sort of divided up folks that were either had high levels of grievance, moderate, or low levels of grievance. And so 61% of the global population either have a moderate or high level of grievance. And so that begs the question, what are they aggrieved about? And here's some of the themes that we saw. One, that business and government serve select few, that business and government, some of the actions of those entities actually hurt me individually. They felt that the system favors the rich, and that many felt that the rich are just getting richer. So net, the system is not set up to look after me, and it's actually having an impact on my livelihood as an individual. So let's fast forward. This was an interesting takeaway. One of the areas of strength in terms of trust has always been levels of trust in my employer. We usually ask about employers or CEOs or different spokespersons, but when we ask about levels of trust in my employer, that's always been a real strength, and we've actually seen year over year those to continue to grow. This was the first year that we've actually seen that dip, or first year in a long time that we've seen that dip. So we saw year over year a 3% drop in levels of trust of my employer, which was pretty interesting. And then just a couple more slides. When we think about communications, right? So a lot of our communications, especially on the corporate side, is focused on executive communications, CEO communications. It's a very important part of the communications plans. We found that when you look at grievance levels and you split that out and you ask about trust in CEOs in general versus my CEO. So there's some good news and some interesting news, but the good news is that people on the whole, even those that have low or moderate grievance, still somewhat trust their CEO. You see those with high grievance. There's certainly a 20% delta from those that have low to high grievance. But it was really interesting to see that just the concept of a CEO and trust levels in a CEO figure, for those that have low grievances, they're much more trusting. But when you look at those that are highly aggrieved, there's a 34% delta in the levels of trust of executives. And so this is a bit of an insight for us as communication practitioners to think about. The role of a CEO is still incredibly important, and maybe half of your audiences will have some levels of trust in that position of power. But it does beg the strategy for us to think about what are the other voices that you should insert into your strategy. So things that we've seen be successful is more peer-to-peer communication coupled with CEO or executive communications, meaning someone that looks and talks like me, someone that doesn't hold a position of power. Hearing from them is almost equally or maybe even more important than hearing from those authority figures. Okay, this is the last slide, and then we'll start to problem solve. Okay, this was a shock to everyone as we got the data back. We talked about those fears that have moved into polarization that are now moved into what we would say is a crisis of grievance. And for many of those folks, they want to drive change. But it was astounding to see in our data that 4 in 10 see hostile activism as a realistic means to drive change. So when we talk about hostile activism, what are we talking about? We're talking about either attacking folks online or intentionally spreading disinformation or threatening or committing violence, which I think for many of us in December, when you saw that executive in New York City being gunned down in the middle of the streets, it was a shock to us. But almost 1 in 4 people see that as they approve of hostile activism to drive societal change. And lastly, damaging public or private property. 1 in 2 people globally actually say they approve of some level of hostile activism. And then if we split this out by age demographic, age 18 through 34, or 1 in 2 young adults actually say they approve of this level of activism. That's incredibly shocking. All right, so what can we do about it? And who should do something about it? Well, we talked about the fact that business is the most trusted institution. And so there is a lot of expectation on business to help solve these problems. And while they're not individually responsible, they do have the most goodwill to actually solve some of these issues. So we looked at what are those areas where, regardless of grievance level, high, medium, or low, where do they agree that there are solutions to be had, and what would actually change and lower that state of grievance and help earn trust? And so the next few slides are those universal areas where there's wide agreement about ways to solve this state of grievance. So the first one is a lot of folks, regardless of grievance level, said that they feel like business does have an obligation to provide good paying jobs in local communities, as well as training and reskilling employees to be competitive, especially in the state of technology and especially in the state of AI. These are kind of a no-brainer, right? Pay people good in the communities and give people the training they need to survive. Okay, that makes sense to me. They also felt like business isn't doing enough on societal issues. And so what are those societal issues that they specifically talk about? Well, affordability, we talked about well-paying jobs, but climate change and retraining and solving misinformation and disinformation, and then discrimination, which we saw on that earlier slide. So taking a stand and solving these problems, even though in the many business contexts, a lot of business leaders would say, well, that's not really our responsibility. My charge to a lot of our clients are, if you're doing something in these areas and if you're helping to solve these societal issues, these are really good places for you to talk about what you're doing, because that's going to earn your trust. They also said that CEOs are justified to address societal issues if their business can make a major impact on the challenges that make an impact on the societal issues of today. And also, if you're doing something to improve your business performance, which was pretty surprising, right? Even those highly aggrieved folks say, we actually do want to hear when CEOs are doing a good job or when business is doing a good job to improve performance. So that goes back to a lot of the purpose conversation is it's important to do good as a company and have great performance while solving societal issues. That is a winning strategy. They also want to hear from executives, and in particular, they want to hear CEOs be accountable. So if their business has contributed to a problem, a societal issue, or if a business has issued harms to their customers, employees, or communities, whether intentional or non-intentional, there's a strong expectation. 3 out of 4 people globally say that this is what they want to hear CEOs to talk about. So again, as you're thinking about the strategy, sometimes admitting and taking accountability earns a huge amount of trust. They also want to hear, and they believe that business has an obligation to nurture workplace civility. Again, when we go back to polarization, there was a couple stats that stood out where folks felt like they couldn't even talk to their neighbors anymore because they were concerned about would they say something that may cause a disagreement, or maybe they have a different point of view than their neighbor. But universally, everyone is saying we want to have a workplace of civility, and that's incredibly important. So this is, again, a great area for you if you're trying to earn trust for your clients or at your business or in your role. This is also a great data point. A couple more slides. All right. So this is an eye chart, but essentially what this chart, the takeaway is that the more that you grow trust, the more that we address those grievances, the more that we address some of those universal areas where there's high or low grievance, we start to see those levels of grievance come down, and we actually see trust in business go up, trust in government, trust in NGOs, and trust in media go up. So there is a happy solution here. So in takeaway, what can we do about this? One, the first step in recovery is admitting that there's a problem. And so again, this is a sobering message, an alarming message, and who knows where the numbers will be next year. But I think a lot of us can feel this state of grievance. We see it in the news, we see it in the headlines, we see it in the conversation with our colleagues and with our neighbors and with our family and our friends. So yes, we are in a crisis of grievance globally. That's what the numbers tell us. Yes, business has an opportunity to act as the most trusted institution across all four of the institutions. There's a tremendous amount of goodwill, and there is a forum and a way for business to address some of those societal issues where universal grievance or universal levels of grievances, folks say, yes, there's an opportunity. And we actually want to hear from business when they're taking a stand or helping these societal issues. But business can't act alone. So our research says, yes, business has an opportunity, but when it's coupled with government or when you partner with NGOs or when you partner with media, that is a great way to go about it. And also that business doesn't have to do this alone. So in a lot of our conversations, even starting back at Davos, we saw a lot of business and government entities come together, or we saw NGOs partner with business to solve some of these issues. Those gains in trust still come, but they don't have to do it alone. And then as the data shows, as the more that we invest in growing trust, the more that those levels of grievances come down, and the more that we'll see those levels of trust grow across the institutions. So that concludes this session. Again, if there's anything that you saw, anything in here that you think would be helpful to anyone, feel free to go ahead to trust.com or edelman.com. We have a whole section on trust, and we have all of the reports over the last 25 years. Feel free to grab that. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jonathan, for this wonderful overview of the trust barometer. I think it's towards the end, it's a refreshing take, right? I really appreciated your overview. Whilst the findings are grim, it's a moment of grievance and then also hostile activism, which again, to your point too, is really concerning. At the same time, it was refreshing for me to hear that organizations still have to hone in on messages about societal issues like affordability, climate change, discrimination, right? And making sense of it at this moment is really important. I don't think that we have to mute these concerns. In fact, organizations have to still actively engage in that. Thank you so much for your time, Jonathan. We are really appreciative for this overview, and it's kind of going to situate for the rest of our conversations. Thank you for joining us today.
That was so oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Anita.
I appreciated JJ laying that out so well. And what we're going to do now, we promised interactivity, and people have already started to weigh in on our first poll. We'd love to take a finger of the pulse, see it as we're going to do our own little trust barometer here with all of you watching today and joining in. And we wanted to ask, where do you see the biggest challenge in building trust? And Ekin, you and I can take a look at this and see we've got some interesting congregations of themes here. It looks like policy is pretty heavy, and then we've also got everywhere. So this echoes. I think the finger on the pulse of our collective here echoes some of the themes that we're hearing that JJ laid out so well.
Exactly. I think it's, thank you all for participating in these polls and also sharing what we are as a learning community are thinking about at this moment, right? I mean, I really appreciated JJ starting us off today to situate the conversation before we dive into three learning sessions following this learning session. Trust is at the core of it. But then I think one of the things that JJ really mentioned was that there was a change that hasn't been seen in a while. There has been drastic changes in all areas. So I am not surprised that there's an everywhere response, right? A lot of, because there's a lot of shifts going on across different domains of trust, right? How we make sense of it globally too. I mean, we're a
Yes.
global program, and what we do nationally and globally are more intertwined than ever. But I'm also seeing, of course, we're at a moment of concern for government policy and making sense of that. And then media too. I know there's like different movements around we have a really fragmented digital media and social media space. Our program grants a degree in digital media, and we've been teaching different tools for many years now. But in my time as an educator, I haven't seen such fragmentation of audiences through tools, through spaces, through what they listen to, what they interact with, what social media tool they use to nationally and globally too. So indeed, thank you all for your participation. We'll continue the engagement. And again, when we curated this experience for you all, we kind of had a vision. So I think JJ situating us in Edelman's Trust Barometer as a key leader, leading these conversations in the field. One of the things that JJ highlighted was about a decline of trust in business leaders and CEOs. So this next conversation with one of our esteemed faculty members, who we've been thinking it for a while, for so many years, I think really kind of follows this conversation really thoughtfully, offering us another lens of state of trust and what matters now. Indeed, this trust in CEOs, trust in business leaders, trust in leaders, not just in business but across sectors, have been renegotiated at this moment, and it's really important to make sense of how to rethink that. And I think making sense of internal communication. So not what our external perspective is, which always matters, but in how we relate that and build consensus internally matters more than ever to engage our employees so that we have, a consensus, but also collaboration in how we move forward with our messages. And thinking about these practices, I think, is really valuable in this moment where trust in leaders is in question or being renegotiated. So I'm really, really excited to hear next from Melissa Schwartz about internal communication and how that matters now. And again, we're going to, just to give you a sense, we're going to go through, Melissa is going to talk to us about this, and we're going to continue with our reflection activities. And then in the second half, after Melissa too, we're going to dive a bit into engagement with audiences. But I really, before we move there, right, about what we say externally, I think we have to really make sense of what we say internally to our team. So Anita, I would love for you to introduce Melissa to our wonderful learners today who are turning in or watching this recording.
It would be my absolute pleasure. I've had the joy of knowing Melissa for the last decade. And so Melissa Schwartz most recently served as senior counselor to the Secretary and Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of the Interior. She's now the Chief Public Affairs and Policy Officer for Democracy Forward and brings to the role 25 years of cross-sector work at the intersection of communications and public policy. She serves as a senior affiliate instructor at the Communication Leadership Program, where she spearheaded our first crisis communications course, now a staple of the curriculum. Today, as Ekin mentioned, Melissa is going to share her thoughts about the crucial role a strong internal communication strategy plays in employee morale, their retention, and their impact. Welcome, Melissa.
Well, hi there. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to join Connects 2025.
Yeah, we can't wait to learn from you. We look forward to your insights, Melissa.
Well, with that, I'll just take it away. Anita, thank you for that kind introduction and for your faith in me as a new Seattleite who showed up hoping to contribute to the ComLead community several years ago. Shall I kick it off, Ekin? Should I get started?
Perfect.
Okay. Well, before I start, I just want to establish that I'm speaking to you today in my personal capacity and not on behalf of any of the organizations that I have the honor of being affiliated with. I want to build off of JJ's presentation to focus on internal communications, which is critical to bringing trust in the workforce. Unlike other esteemed speakers, I don't have reading materials for you. I don't even have slides. And it's not because I was asleep on the job. It's because despite me shouting it from the rafters for many, many years, there is actually very little research and information about the importance of internal communications. And that, my friends, is what we're going to talk about today. In marketing this event, the same theme repeatedly has come up. We're going to explore the current state of trust. Well, let me tell you, there is an incredible deficit happening across our nation when it comes to trust. But I'm not going to talk about the multinational corporations who are rescinding their commitments to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I'm not going to talk about educational institutions betraying their transgender and gender non-binary students by walking back access to opportunity. And I'm not going to talk about our current administration, which every day is sinking to new lows to humiliate and target the more than 2 million Americans who have committed themselves to public service. Because this is a day about learning and exploration, and it's about what each and every one of us can do to contribute. So we're going to talk about the positive ways that we can make an impact. Why to build internal communications into your systems, how to effectively engage with employees, and how to leverage that engagement to expand your reach and message, and how doing that isn't just the right thing, but the smart thing to do is what I'm hoping to discuss for the next 20 minutes. One of the mistakes that many organizations make is that they spend so much time focused on how they are perceived outside of an organization that they fail to spend as much energy on how they're viewed inside. Many of you watching are familiar with traditional communications roles. Communications teams, marketing teams, press teams, social media teams, but few have a person specifically tasked with internal communications. In my opinion, this is an equally critical but often disregarded element, which can really make the difference in how effective your communication strategy is and in how successful an organization is. If staff have not been brought in and have not bought in, then I believe a company is losing the battle before they've begun. And that's what we're going to explore. So I'm going to start with the why this is important. In general, we accept or seek job opportunities because we support the product, we believe in the mission, we align with the perspective that a company or organization is promoting. In many ways, a new employee is a company's best asset, right? They're enthusiastic, they're inspired. But once an employee gets past the human resources orientation, they start to become a product of the environment around them. And that means that the clock has started in continuing to cultivate their support. The same is true for students enrolled at a given university, right? You come in excited and revved up, go Huskies, but how do they keep your loyalty? Are they out there? Are you out there every day hyping up UW? If not, is there something that has frustrated you about the organization? Each and every one of you is a part of some organization, a school, a business, a religious institution, a community organization, a marriage, right? Think about it. How do you feel like you're an active part of that group? Do you feel well communicated with? And if so, how? See, whether or not employees continue to root for the organization has a lot to do with how much a part of the team they feel like they are. Now, developing an internal communication strategy often falls to the communications team, which I think is a great opportunity. Who knows better how to tell stories and build narratives than communicators, right? And if you're lucky enough to convince a leader, forgive me, I've got the cold that everybody else has in DC right now. If you're lucky enough to convince a leader to invest time and energy in internal communications, there is one foundational question for you to consider. Why? Why are we doing it? To be successful, it has to be more than because the speaker at a UW event told me to, right? If organizations aren't committed to internal communications, it'll show. And to be successful, this can't be a one-way street, right? Internal communications is about employee engagement, not a mechanism to just report out information. That means back and forth. It means solicitation of ideas and meaningful interactions. And look, sometimes this can scare executives. There's this common misperception that asking someone's opinion means you have to follow it. I mean, not in my house, but you know what I mean. This can undermine an organization's planning before it's even begun. The leadership team is and will remain the decision makers. But that doesn't mean that we should shut out staff input altogether. The number one way to engage internal audiences is to literally bring them to the table, right? Making them part of a planning and implementation process. Employees don't need to win, but they do need to be heard. And if you're going to ask them to engage, making the effort is critically important. I will say, forgive me, I'm freezing a little on my screen, so I hope I'm not freezing for anybody else's. I want to say that there is no perfect internal communications plan. But I'll tell you, I'm very proud of what we did at the Department of the Interior. So let me take a minute and share a case study to illustrate what is possible to answer the question of how we meaningfully engage employees. Deb Holland would repeatedly tell audiences that her favorite part of the job as secretary was meeting career civil servants. And so early on, she gave us a mandate to find meaningful opportunities for engagement. We had walked into an organization in which morale was suffering, where leadership had previously been viewed as top-down, where staff had the perception that no one really cared what they thought, and where they built the community on their own, but not as an organizational priority. So we got to work through words and actions. And what that looked like for us was regular all-employee emails to our 60,000 plus person workforce, a weekly newsletter for all employees, an intranet internal to interior employees to provide resources and build community, twice a year all-employee virtual town halls, monthly events with many of our employee resource groups, which created community for diverse parts of our workforce, visits with employee teams following successful rollouts and project implementation, in-person regional events during her aggressive travel schedule, personalized thank you notes and group photos from each and every stop she made within the DOI community, and the launch of the Ask Deb mailbox, where staff could send emails to the executive office for response and feedback. That and a farewell tour that left no corner of our workforce untouched. Now, not everyone has the time and resources to invest in internal communications on that scale, and that's okay. Pick a few of them, right? Engagement isn't binary. Think of it as an a la carte menu that matches the level of energy that you can put into it. And I want to drill down into just a few of those. An important step in employee engagement is to be flexible enough to conceive that there are multiple ways to success when engaging staff. Employees need to respond to opportunities to interact in many ways. So just like the students watching today, some of you raise your hands in class. Some of you engage only if called on. Some of you prefer written responses, and others look for opportunities to engage anonymously. Once a company knows the why they want to build an internal communication strategy and commits to meaningful engagement, they should build in employee opportunities that allow for the introverts and the extroverts alike. These might include all employee town halls, which are an excellent step in making sure your staff feel that they're a part of being heard. Town halls not only allow you to disseminate information quickly and broadly, they also bring your staff together for the shared experience. Now, these are not without challenges. In fact, town halls can carry a high risk, and they are not recommended for the weak at heart. You know, this format is made for the extroverts and showboats among us. There is often one employee who stands up to comment or ask a question who can put on a bit of a show. That puts the leader in the spotlight in a way that can make them incredibly uncomfortable. But despite this challenge, it's still an excellent way to engage your internal audience, the success of which relies on how you adapt to your leader and your workforce. I'll use another case study. Following the Deepwater Horizon disaster in 2011, I came in to lead communications for the Federal Bureau, blamed falsely for having been responsible. As an early strategy to rebuild remarkably low morale and, frankly, deep mistrust in us as new leaders, the Bureau director and I went on a tour to all of the regional offices to hold town halls. At the first stop, I had the idea to take questions from the room, which was a problem when people started talking about HR-sensitive matters. At the second stop, we decided to take anonymous questions via sealed envelopes submitted in bowls in each office. which was a problem when the director found himself opening the envelopes and reading aloud feedback in real time, which brought some foul language and a very sloppy process. So at the third stop, we got smarter. We pre-opened the envelopes and organized them in batches to read aloud, and then we had batches to follow up separately. That was 3 times to get it right, but you know what? Every one of those opportunities was worth it. It was worth it to the staff to see us try. And part of that success was due to a leader who gave me the grace to get it right. Engagement isn't perfect. Engagement can be messy. But if you don't try, you will 100% fail. Even the strongest executive can be unnerved as they struggle to manage and moderate an all-employee town hall. And there are a few ways to make town halls a little less overwhelming that I want to talk about. One is to break staff into smaller, manageable groups based on a division or a department. Another is to create a panel of executives who can sort of pivot to each other based on the relevance or the question or the comment. The third is to take written questions ahead of time, right, that you can review and prepare for before the meeting begins. The cautionary advice I would say is if you decide not to answer a question, be ready to be challenged on it and have a good answer to explain your decision. The example I gave, we responded to every question, if not individually, then thematically in the meeting or via email afterwards, because that's how you build trust with your team. I am not trusting this platform for a moment, so I just want to apologize. There's a terrible storm in DC, and I understand I'm freezing a little bit. So I do apologize if you're missing my witty banter. I am going to do my best I'll recap some stuff with Ekin and Anita afterwards and during the Q&A section. So 1 is employee town halls. 2 is employee surveys. So whether written or electronic, staff surveys allow your employees to provide feedback to you confidentially. Though much less dynamic than an employee town hall, surveys do appeal to the more introverted of employees. The challenge with a survey is that someone actually needs to read the responses. Right? Being unresponsive to a staff survey will decrease trust with your staff and lower participation next time you want to survey employee opinion. The third is employee intranet. An internal website or intranet creates a community for employees where they can learn about what's going on and engage with each other. Like the employee surveys, this option requires that someone take responsibility for keeping the site dynamic and interesting. Right? A stagnant intranet isn't going to make employees feel engaged. For big announcements, this is also a really good way to disseminate information, but don't assume it will stay private. So plan that information you put on the intranet could be leaked. That's an important thing to be thinking about as you develop it. None of this is easy, but it's worth it. It's also an essential tool for communicators to get the message out, right? This is how you promote your work. Building a foundation before you need to lean on your internal audiences to help get information out is the only way to ensure that your efforts are sincere. This also allows you to leverage that engagement to expand your reach and message. In particular, I want to focus on just a few strategies in getting your messages out when an organization or company has diverse affiliates around the country. This is something you see at nonprofit organizations, big corporations, union or member organizations, universities with multiple campuses, right? These are entities that report up to a leadership structure, but in and of themselves have small governing bodies. And coordinating with this is hard. The dynamic between headquarters and field cannot be overstated. It's critical and can be the difference between success and failure in succeeding with your organization's communications plan. It's easy to hand chain stores talking points about a new product or initiative, but whether or not they use them and answer customer questions effectively is a different thing. If a local affiliate of an organization is saying something different than a national organization during a crisis, you have a problem, right? There's always a tension there, which is important to pay attention to. Headquarters will say, the field doesn't understand. We've done all this message testing. They need to deliver our talking points. The field will say, those fools in headquarters don't understand how this is playing on the ground. I've seen this a lot, but I think there's a few ways to minimize the heartburn. 1, make sure your strategy is reinforced. Don't just have a top-down approach, right? Send a memo outlining your communications plans. Then have a call with your team. Explain to them that they're part of the success of this rollout and why you're doing what you're doing. 2, create and encourage a feedback loop. If folks on the ground are hearing that their messages are not effective, wouldn't it be nice to know? It makes me crazy to find out that I've done all of this work and put together a great comms plan only to find out that the staff thinks it sucks or aren't using it. So create opportunities to receive feedback from your staff as they're implementing a rollout plan. You may learn something in the process, tweak your message, or adjust your strategy. 3, value staff as a stakeholder. Too often, employees learn about announcements or major developments via social media or the water cooler or a news story. Your staff are as valuable a stakeholder as any other entity. Make sure you have pathways to get them news about the organization they are a part of. Newsletters, intranet, email blasts, whatever works for your communication structure, there is no step too small to demonstrate that employees are part of your team. Worst case, they get too many emails and they delete or filter. Best case, you're building trust, you're building brand, and you're building community. Now, as I wind down, I want to reinforce that you should never underestimate the value of reflecting on employee feedback. As I said earlier, employee email or input doesn't mean change is absolutely going to happen. There may be nothing we hear from internal communications that an employee engagement that makes a difference in any management decision. But that doesn't mean company leadership shouldn't regularly mention the active participation of their staff, the appreciation of the feedback, and the value of their perspective. Regular attempts should be made to follow up on the internal communications opportunities that have been created. And employers shouldn't be afraid to name employees who have made an impact. This type of validation can make a very real difference in employee engagement. This might look like, we've heard from several of you about topic X, and we've made the following changes. Or, thank you to everyone who weighed in on topic Y. We are proud to share that thanks to employee feedback, we're taking the following step. Or, we understand that some of you have been really frustrated with topic Z. We want to explain our decision-making process and how we will continue to listen and learn as we move forward. This recognition encourages staff to continue to engage with leadership. It makes them feel heard and, again, builds that trust that we're focused on. For some of you, that was 17 minutes more than you've ever thought about internal communications. But I truly believe that no step in an employee engagement strategy is too small to be ignored. You have to take this seriously when times are calm, because during a big announcement or a crisis, the foundation an organization has built sets the entire context it's operating in. I've seen this play out several times. At an organization with strong staff trust, loyalty, and communications, you see less leaks to the media, less panic, less attrition, and more collaboration. Investing in internal communications is how you turn employees into advocates. It's how you strengthen productivity. It's how you hear early feedback to improve products and media launches. It's how you put your values into practice. And it's how you build trust in leaders and institutions. So I deeply apologize for the technical challenges that may have happened. Thank you all for your time today and for your interest in this work and for your willingness to learn about the ways in which employee engagement can go beyond checking a box to create meaningful and lasting change. Thank you, Ekin and Anita, for your trust in me to take you on this journey. And with that, I will hand it back to our leaders.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Yeah, it was so thoughtful and so comprehensive. I took so many notes when I was listening to you. I've done a lot of learning. I'll turn it over to Anita, who has some, I know her own things, but some follow-up as well.
Well, first of all, I want to assure you, Melissa, that your voice came through loud and clear. And as we always teach in our CommLead classes on storytelling, whether it's videography or audio storytelling, audio is everything. So do not worry about the very few times that you froze, because your audio was perfect. So thank you for that. And I really appreciate all that you've laid out. And as I was like, again, notes. And the things I wrote down were, you're talking about a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a sense of shared work. And that is so foundational to the way in which organizations of any stripe have the impact that they are intending to achieve. And so I so appreciate you laying these out in very actionable ways too. And I look forward to the Q&A when we are able to bring in the audience, and I'm sure there'll be follow-up to what you've shared. But so grateful for the time we've had to hear from you.
Thank you all.
Exactly. We're also hearing from you all who are watching and learning with us live, and your comments. And I know that some audiences who just met Melissa, who are joining us today, we're very excited about learning from Melissa for the first time. But we had a number of people, alumni, who've taken classes with Melissa before, and they've been kind of connecting back to those days. And as our Associate Director, Gretchen Ludwig, on the comments just shared, Melissa is teaching a crisis communication class again this summer for our community. So we're really thrilled. And again, to your point too, Anita, kind of creating feedback loops and turning employees into kind of advocates, right, for an organization is really, really important. And it's actually hard work and it's communication work. And I'm so glad that we were able to think about that. And maybe it's time for another poll question now. We were talking, and again, to that point, Melissa talked a lot about, creating feedback loops and understanding that like what you're doing is actually really resonating with the people that you're communicating with. Part of the communication process is conversation, right? This could be anonymous, and polls and surveys are, really, really important for us to make sense of it. So we are kind of like thinking through, and I think there was a poll question right before this too that was capturing your sentiments about kind of making sense of how to kind of engage with polls and audiences, thinking through about the importance of internal communication, not just for engagement but for branding. As we transition into our next question, that's something that we've been thinking about too, and the organization that our next speaker, who's an alumni of our program, who's someone I got to work with closely when she was in the program, a leader in the field for multiple years across organizations, have been really contributing to conversations about, what it means for brands to connect with audiences too. Again, one part is that employee engagement and internal communication to build an infrastructure where people are trusted and talked about. But the other part that actually is really, really important is this, how brands actually use tools and understand their audiences. Here we're seeing our audience responding to a number of reasons why, we feel more connected to a brand, from authenticity to emotional connection, to consistency, to cultural relevance, to personalization. But, the top answer right now is authenticity. But for a brand to authentically connect and lead in their field, they have to have a really holistic understanding of who they're talking to. And in the US and beyond, of course, audiences are not unitary. They're not one big group, but understanding the different groups within a nation, different cultural groups, different groups that actually have some core components in common is really, really important. Interbrand is an organization our next speaker is at, and Interbrand has been kind of determining the top 100 brands of the world, and thinking through holistically also about brand leadership. And we're going to explore a way for brands to lead by really honing it into understanding their audiences and what matters for them. Particularly in this case, Interbrand published, this is in our mini syllabus too, so you can dive deeper into this report too. Our speaker, Beatriz Cardoso Guimarães, is one of the people who made this report possible. Really looks and hones in on the Latino populations and their relationship to brands around their campaigns, around how they appear. So it's a really, really important insight. It's a fresh and new insight too that I'm really excited for us to share. So I'll let Anita introduce our next speaker.
Yes, wonderful. Both Ekin and I had the pleasure of teaching Bea, and it's so wonderful to have you back in this capacity, Bea, to share your expertise. So Beatriz Cardoso Guimarães is a senior strategy director at Interbrand New York, and she brings over 20 years of experience working with top global organizations, where she advises businesses and brands to deliver in new and unexpected ways for stakeholders. Bea is Brazilian, now living in the United States, and has worked across more than 20 countries in Latin America and the United Kingdom. As Ekin mentioned, she's also an alumnus of the Communication Leadership Program, where she received her Master of Communication in Communities and Networks. And today, Bea will present how brands can more intentionally connect with the Latino community in the United States, over 65 million and counting, by seeing them not as a monolith, but as a kaleidoscope of cultures. Welcome, Bea. We're so excited to hear from you.
That's such a pleasure to be here with you all. Oh my God. Yes, it's emotional to me. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting. I can't hear
When
you.
I
Oh, okay.
when I heard about your report and how what you were working on, I thought this would be a really important insight for communities that we're serving to learn about as they're thinking about their marketing campaigns, communication strategies, and this approach towards understanding particular populations. So I'll turn it over to you to share your insights and research with us.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'll share my screen, okay? Because I have a small PowerPoint, of course, as a good consultant, right? Can you see my screen? I'm moving to presentation mode. Can you see it? I cannot see you, so because I just have one screen. So if you can give me like a verbal cue.
I I can't see it yet, but let's see if you're able to. If you share the screen on the on this platform, Bea, I don't know if it's shared yet. I'm not seeing it yet.
Let me see now.
Yeah, they say that we need it shared by the Emux platform, which is the live stream platform that we're using.
There should be a little icon for you, Bea, below the screen that has the share screen icon. I think that you can just
Yeah,
click it.
this is what I'm doing. And let me cancel and go again. So I'm sharing the entire screen,
Great.
share. And then I'm going to the presentation mode. Can you see now?
I will ask our production team now. Can you guys?
Oh, that's great, great. Okay, thank you. So please give me verbal cues if you need something from me. Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm here representing Interbrand New York, where I work. I had the opportunity to co-lead this report, and I'm also going to mention another report that is IP from Interbrand, that is the Best Global Brands report. Like JJ said, in the case of the Trust Barometer, our report is also 25 years old. So it's a great thing to look at the two together, and you can download them, both reports, in our website. So the idea to discuss this topic, specifically about Latinos, started like more than 2 years ago when I joined Interbrand. As a Latina, I got to the company thinking that we had like a practice for Latinos, and of course we had many people really understanding audiences demographic, but not necessarily the Latinos, which is a gigantic population in the US. So we decided to start exploring how to talk about this matter. But also, I think it's an important point to make that lots of things that we're going to end this presentation with are important thoughts for whatever audience brands are trying to connect with. So I'm going to also mention 3 examples, and you're going to see how this is easily translated into other audiences, okay? One important thing here too, as Melissa said, this is not about DEI. It's really beyond DEI. I also use words like trust, authenticity. That is like the common thread in what we're doing here today. Anyway, I think it's going to be fun to discuss this with you. So the Latino cohort is a driving force in the country right now. If we were to compare the Latino cohort to a country itself, would be the 7th largest economy in the world. So the number is the GDP of the Latino cohort in the US is $3.6 billion. You see, it's something really considerable. And actually, everything related to the Latino cohort in the US, the GDP is growing double of the rest of the GDP in the country. So around 13% is the number, right? So you see not only the importance, but also accelerating the penetration in the whole economy of the US. Currently, the Latino community is around 20% of the population in the country, and it's going to be 25% by 2050. Okay, so this is showing that quantitatively and also qualitatively, the importance of the cohort is growing in the country. But what we're seeing is that many brands, major brands specifically, are still not capturing the potential of this cohort. And I think there's one important point to make here, that is, we're not going to talk about brands that exclusively target Latinos, but we're talking about brands that are mass brands and have to think about Latinos as part of their audiences, right? So again, this applies to other demographics or audiences too. At Interbrand, we did some projects that were specifically for brands that target exclusively Latinos, but this is not the case here. It's how to open the aperture, and in a brand that has the challenge to connect to many audiences, also looked at this one, right? So, as I said, many major brands are still not capturing the immense potential of this community. Some important data points we have is just 4% of their marketing budget is spent on this cohort, and 28% of the Latinos are dissatisfied with products from major brands. There's two important studies saying that if brands were to address this dissatisfaction in the short term, potentially brands could unlock more than $100 billion in revenue, and in more like medium term, this number would be 600 billion, which is a lot, right? Like if you think 600 billion in the 3.5 trillion is 1/6 of this number. So then we explored these topics. By the way, I should have mentioned that we did both quantitative and qualitative research, and we also spoke to CMOs and experts in the field. And these numbers are coming from these conversations. So 40% of US Latinos believe brands don't even make an effort to try to connect with them. And 60% of US Latinos believe brands try to accurately connect with them, but fail in execution. So it's a huge opportunity, right? Untapped brand leadership opportunity. This is one important framework for Interbrand that connects brands as simple identifiers, how we used to see brands in the past, right? So you see the example of Coca-Cola, but the whole journey of how we see brands until we get to this moment where we see brands in a way as acts of leadership, and really connecting to what JJ said in terms of still trusting companies and brands to be able to act responsibly and change the status quo. So we have this journey. A long time ago, we used to think, oh, brand is like a logo, almost like you have the Coca-Cola logo, of course. And then we started thinking about brands as assets. I mean, the identifier is still continues to be whenever it's just building, right, in all these dimensions. So then brands as assets. So when we start to think about brand as the value, especially like public traded companies. And then there was a very important moment, and I think Apple was a great example here, especially when they opened the stores, that we start to think about brands as experiences. Again, still assets, still identifiers, but elevating to beyond these aspects, right? And then ecosystems, until we get to the point where we think really that brands are acts of leadership. Again, in the same direction that JJ spoke. So we see brands as capable of changing the status quo. And by the way, my final study was brands as platforms for catalyzing culture and social change when I was doing the program. I loved it. We used to think about brands in the business of marketing, then in the business of growth, and now in the business of leadership. And that's the segue for how we're thinking about some examples of brands really connecting well with the Latino cohort. So we looked at our analysis, but also at the ranking, the best global brands ranking that Interbrand publishes every year around around Q4. And then we thought about some examples to highlight here. And then we finish more with the theory. So Toyota is a very great example. I love this example for many reasons, because we're talking about not even a US brand, right? So it's a brand that is like the US market is extremely important for Toyota, is very relevant for Toyota, but it's not really a US brand. And Toyota is a case where we understand they really connect well with the Latino. And it's one dimension that the Toyota brand makes this connection very important, that the fact that the brand is about hard work and perseverance. And this aligns really well to the Latino values. If we can summarize the values in this way, because actually we can, this is one of the commonalities within the Latino cohort. And Toyota has this as its core. I'm not saying they thought about this just because they were targeting this community, but they were targeting people with these values. And then the Latino cohort is one that really feels close to these brand values. But also this means that for they need to go beyond just like saying, oh, our value proposition makes a lot of sense for Latinos. No, they need to really find ways to translate the hard work, perseverance promises from the brand to the Latino community, right? So Latino buyers account for 25% of their overall US sales, and you saw like it's a stronger penetration because Latinos are 19-20% of the population. And also, if you think about income, so you see that they really have a great penetration with the Latino cohort. The other example that is a very different angle compared to Toyota, that is equally interesting, is the fact that Nike is also connected in an authentic way with the community, with the cohort. It's not because of necessarily the value proposition of Nike. It's just the commitment they have to lead the way with the Latinos in the US, and really weaving everything into the fabric of the company. So it's how they work product, they work messaging, they work also DEI in this case, they work internally. It's really something that feels authentic to the brand, this connection to the Latinos, right? They, as I said, internally, they have 19% Latino workforce, which is exactly the representation of the cohort in the country. And then the last example that is also a different angle is a lot about products. So Disney has really innovated with tailored products that resonate culturally with the Latino community. And here you see an obvious example, right? So these are different ways that brands that do this really well connect with the cohort. But I would like to really connect this more with the theory and some methodology, right? So this is to say that also stronger brands deliver superior business growth. And these brands are part of our 100 best global brands This is the chart of 2023. And you see how these brands perform better in terms of delivering value to all shareholders and stakeholders. So you can see this in the Best Global Brands report too. So these three brands are part of the report, and this is all strategy to create value for the brand, right? So we have 8 imperatives on how to get it right, and in at this moment, I think it's important for us to reflect not only in the Latinos cohort, but also all audiences that brands target. So starting with a great or an excellent work starts with dive deep. That means you really have to understand your audience, and this is about quality research. Is not just guessing. And again, I think one nuance here is the fact that you're not, because of the brands that we're talking about are not just targeting Latinos, they are targeting it's mass brands, right? It's like general population in a way. How do you craft the research in a way that, of course, is insightful considering Gen Pop, but also has a reading into the audience that you are interested in, especially in this case, the Latinos, right? So a lot of the complaints of the Latinos is about stereotypes and things like this, and like very shallow understanding of their values, and also not understanding the nuances, because they're not, as Anita said in the introduction, they're not a monolith group. They do have some things in common, as I shared, like, for example, in the Toyota example, values. Majority of the group shares lots of common values, but they are not a monolithic group. So it's really important to understand this cohort. Then the second imperative is earn the right to engage with this audience. This means that it's not just about marketing. So, and I think this connects super well to what JJ brought up too. That is the fact that trust is built with the communities internally and externally for many reasons, not just because you have the right marketing initiatives. So that's a great thing to do. Like, you have to really be diligent about everything you're doing, and then in this case, including DEI, because you cannot go externally with a great marketing campaign, but like internally be failing the audience, right? Then harness value-driven narratives. As I think Toyota is a great example for this value-driven narrative, in terms of really understanding how your overarching brand narrative is going to land well with this audience. It's not changing the overarching narrative, but it's really landing in messaging and campaigns and etc. Then the fourth imperative, and this is a very the example that I shared about Disney, develop offerings that authentically cater to Latinos in the US. And Nike has some too. It's very interesting. So you need to go like strategy to product and on, right? So then the last 4 imperatives: be mindful of the whole customer journey. As I said, it's not just about marketing, it's everything. Like all touch points, literally, you need to think about how to really engage with the audience and serve the audience and be mindful. Then show up where cultures intersect. I think this is mostly relevant for the Latino cohort, but it's also a great point to think about for other audiences. Latinos in the US, most of them at this point were born in the US, so they are American too, right? So they feel they are Latinos, but also American. And a lot happens where the cultures intersect. So this is extremely important for them. Highlight Latino role models in every arena. It's not just about music or entertainment. And the last one is focus. And what it means here is You need budget. You need the correct organizational structure to address this matter. Doesn't necessarily mean you need an area focus on Latinos. There are many different ways of doing that, but you do need budget. You do need agreement in the leadership team. You do need a very intentional way of dealing with the audience, not just an afterthought. So this is a quote from our chief strategy, from our partner and one of our chief strategy officers, that in the next 10 years, the Latino audience will impact every single aspect of our business. And that's it. So you can download the report if you want to read it. There's a lot there.
Thank you so much, Bea, for this really thoughtful analysis, and I really appreciated your also connecting it to constituents and sectors across beyond branding, but in branding too, and also thinking through. I think again to your point too. This is really important research about Latino populations, but I think you can imagine kind of different versions of this for a variety of different groups within and beyond the US. And I think the methodology of your approach is really important for us to understand. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you more when we dive deep into Q&A too. Again, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for this wonderful report.
Thank you.
So as we are kind of diving deeper into our topics, and we have finished one kind of component of our conversation, and we're diving into deeper topics and thinking through, we're continuing to engage you too with our Mentimeter polls. Again, we started talking about audiences, and I'll revisit this poll, Anita, if that's okay with you.
Yes,
but I just want to
please.
mention it after our next speaker too, because again, as we're trying to make sense of everything, a common theme that I've been hearing, and I would love your thoughts on this, is to be heard and to be seen. And storytelling and narratives is a part of it. Bea talked about strategies of kind of telling stories that resonate with particular audiences. But our program, our master's program at University of Washington, is very much about understanding strategy, as Bea very much outlined, understanding insights, but then kind of putting that insight into work of thinking through the types of stories, types of campaigns we can create for organizations across sectors. So I'll just prompt everyone, again, we'll want your answers throughout our talk. And when we're talking now with Anita, I'll show the results. We'll show the results after we heard from Sian. A story that changed my perspective was, and because. So we want to welcome you to answer this. It will take a little more longer, but we wanted to prompt you to think about kind of stories that impacted your perspective and impacted kind of how you understand things as well. But Anita, what are some common themes that you've been hearing? We've now had 3 wonderful presentations. What came to your mind as we were trying to kind of think through and thread through? Because I think they connect in so many concrete ways.
Absolutely. Something that's been coming up for me is the word intentionality, whether that's an intentionality in terms of the way in which leaders engage with those in their organizations, marketers engage with those that they are trying to connect within. And that intentionality happens in many different ways. And I think something that is coming through all 3 of the speakers we've heard so far, and I think will continue, is how do we deeply listen to the constituency of the moment, whether it's an internal listening, whether it's external listening. And I really appreciated Bea's presentation. But those are 2 themes that are elevated for me now in connecting across JJ, Melissa, and now Bea's presentation.
And how do we build infrastructures to listen and to hear, right? I mean, that's something that I think is really inspiring me right now, having heard and engaged in this really deep learning opportunity. And I'm inviting all of you learning with us too to think about, in your organizations currently, in your organizations in the future, in the organizations that you've been part of, what would have been tools and methods that could have been implemented for you to be heard and seen better? because again, these are communication tools. And as to your point, Anita, from JJ's talk about thinking about trust at this moment, and maybe sometimes organizations kind of rely on existing tools too much, and I think we have to refresh our approach at any given time with new insights and new research. And I think I've been thinking about like, what are those tools that allow two-way communication, right? I know Melissa also talked about like kind of acknowledging feedback, right? So not only do you listen, but then also you give away kind of a sense of, a sense of you listening, a sense of you acknowledging a story you've heard, and all of that. So I think that's a really important moment for us to think about that at this moment as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look at this. We're getting some responses here. We've got some engagement here on a story that changed my perspective was blank because of blank.
And I'll read one, and again, we'll read a few more maybe after our next talk. But
Yes.
I'll read one. A story that changed my perspective was a personal narrative of a person without a home, because I understood she had a story, feeling, experiences, and was human, fully human like me. Right.
Yes.
So again, these perspectives and your perspectives as you participate in learning with us really, I think, ties. And again, I think you talk about intentionality. I think there's really intentionality in the way in which we hope to bring all these wonderful leaders in the field together. And it's, hearing them kind of think with each other also is really inspiring me at this moment. Anita, before we introduce our next speaker, I just wanted to remind everyone to also you can use YouTube comments or LinkedIn comments to submit us your questions for our speakers. We're going to have Melissa, Bea, and Sian join us right after our next speaker's presentation for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, these are again amazing leaders in the field. We want to include your perspectives to our learning session too. So please submit your questions. There's a QR code right in the corner of our live stream right now. I can see it. And again, through Mentimeter, start submitting questions. You can also vote on questions you'd like to hear, because we'll have limited time. So if there's a question you see there that you really want me or Anita to ask, please vote it up, and we will share it. But again, use different forums too. We have an amazing again production team. We'll acknowledge them at the end too. They're going to share with us all those questions, and we'll make sure that we incorporate your perspectives. So the kind of, again, I'm so excited. Everything is kind of really neatly tying together. I know one perspective that Bea just talked about in kind of branding, but also understanding audiences, was harnessing values-driven narratives. Right. So it's really interesting at this moment, right? We are globally at a moment, not only do we kind of hear and act with stories, which, really, again, to the perspective of one of our participants, allow us to think about maybe gain empathy, put ourselves in the place of someone, understand a situation that we're familiar or not familiar with, and really understand it from a more holistic perspective. So that's really important, but we are seeing kind of more narratives rise, and why narratives matter in this moment. And I think for organizational communication people across contexts, across the world, I think it matters more than ever to understand the interplay between narratives and stories. How they're similar, if they're the same thing, how are they different? What are narratives? How are organizations cultivate and be a part of a broader narrative, or how they can kind of build that community effort to continue to connect with each other and with distinct maybe stories, but under a more maybe under the umbrella of a narrative. All of these are questions I had in mind, and our next speaker was already thinking about all these things and has an amazing framework to make sense of these nuanced differences about narrative storytelling and how they come together and how organizations can leverage them. So Anita, I'm turning it over to you to introduce our next amazing speaker.
Yes, so excited that Sian Wu is with us today. And like you, Ekin, when I saw the framework for what Sian's going to be sharing today, I was so intrigued by the connection between how do we distinguish between storytelling and stories and narrative? And so Sian Wu is a managing director at Resource Media, a nonprofit creative agency. Her clients include Seattle Region Community Health Partners, where she provides communications capacity for video and content production, advertising, earned media, and social promotion, all while staying attuned to the needs, messaging, and bandwidth for BIPOC-led organizations. Sian shares her rich expertise in the communication leadership classroom through her popular course, Multicultural Marketing, Creating Equitable and Inclusive Communications. And today, Sian is going to teach us how to stitch personal stories into compelling narratives that drive social change. We're so thrilled you're here, Sian. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anita and Ekin. It's just a real honor to be here with you all today and to join the community. And great job, students, on producing the event so far. It's going off really, really great. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sian. We can't wait to learn from you.
Okay. I believe you all should see my presentation soon. Let's see. Are you seeing that now or no?
Not quite yet, but I'm sure it will be coming right up.
Yes, exactly. And I'm looking up at our students too. They'll share with us what we're able to see or not.
Okay. Let's see. I think I shared it earlier.
And I am waiting for our students to share. I think last time Bea refreshed this share screen. So if you want to share again, because of, I think, the duration of our event, which is rich with learning, but long. So I think that's kind of problem solved last time in terms of, yes, our students asked if you could share again using the share screen button on the EveMux platform.
Okay. Yeah, I did that.
And they said it's working now. So
perfect.
Sian. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Okay. So I'm clicking the share screen button again. Okay. Okay, it is sharing. Okay, here we go. Okay. So yeah, first a little bit about Resource Media. We are a nonprofit creative change agency. We have been around for about 20 years. Our work really centers around creating powerful narratives and strategies that transform public opinion, policy, behavior around some of the most urgent issues of our time. And we do that through culturally resonant creative change campaigns and programs. So, the most recent election outcomes are probably one of the most clear indicators that facts and rationality may not matter as much as narrative. So people felt that something was true or just common sense, even when there was clear evidence to the contrary. So how can we use this powerful tool in your own communication strategy, and what exactly is narrative? In the communications field, it seems like there's all sorts of different definitions, and it's come to be that narrative can kind of seem to mean everything and nothing at the same time. So here's my definition. Narrative is a communication strategy that combines a collection of stories with values and beliefs to shape how people see the world and cumulatively feed into a set of cultural assumptions in which we all immerse ourselves. And I really like this pyramid from Butterfly Lab that really offers a visual hierarchy of some of the more broader and more specific categories of communication. So at the top, we have deep narrative. So that's pretty much, the air that we breathe. It's the main ways that we view our societal structures. It's the cultural values that are embedded within that deep narrative. Narrative can be something new that can be shaped through a concerted collection of stories. And then below that, stories are more specific based on experience, and they're a lot more varied. And then messages are probably the most prolific, and those can be changed and tested a lot more quickly. So here are some definitions that can either build power or take it away in terms of types of narrative. So regressive narratives push the inevitability and thus acceptance of worsening conditions for the majority of people in society or community. For example, in the areas of economy, identity, culture, environment. They're often based on fear and mistrust. Liberatory narratives promote and explore liberation, hope, possibility, counter oppressive structures, and center marginalized people's wisdom, agency, needs, and solutions. So you'll hear me use those terms regressive and liberatory narratives throughout my talk. So just wanted to make sure that we all have the same definitions there. And here are some examples of liberatory and aggressive narratives. Liberatory example, the peace industry. So this is something that Yoko Ono started perpetuating. She said, I think that every artistic effort, music or art or films, or even a florist, anybody who's participating in the peace industry is making the world better. Anyone participating in the war industry is making the world worse. We just have to be not so critical of each other in the peace industry, try to make a big peace industry and make it bigger than the war industry. So it's really kind of an allying narrative. It recognizes that that people who are not doing harm in the world can come together, and we're actually a silent majority. Regressive narrative examples, that would be one that the right wing is perpetuating a lot right now, which is that DEI hires are unqualified. So again, there's no evidence that diversity initiatives are resulting in less qualified people or reduction in quality. It's really just feelings. And so that narrative is really perpetuating itself, and people can kind of inadvertently feed into that as well. A deep narrative example that is really prevalent in American society, and that kind of fits well into the grooves of capitalism, is that good things cost more. So whether that's schools or healthcare, people kind of buy into that and end up thinking, oh, I need to pay more in order to get a good education or to get good healthcare. So there's ways to kind of topple that narrative by choosing not to participate in those types of economy. You know, the adopt, don't shop is a way to topple that narrative. Who doesn't love their free puppy or kitten that they got that is helpful to society? It's just as good of a dog as that really fancy pedigree. So the larger frame that deeper narratives have more opportunities to kind of topple, although it does take longer. So here's an example of a narrative project I worked on with one of my clients at the Asian American Leaders Table. This was for AAPI Heritage Month in 2021. And in the wake of anti-Asian hate, we really wanted to dispel this myth that Asian people were kind of passive, weak, privileged, because this was not keeping us safe on the street. And it just was not true, because our communities are very familiar with resistance and hardship. So we created this narrative called Resistance is Our Heritage. And we uplifted stories throughout history of Asian Americans resisting injustice and acting in solidarity with the working class. And here's just one of the stories that we shared. In 1982, Chinese women galvanized thousands of garment workers in an organized strike that marched through Manhattan's Chinatown. Their activism changed US labor history. And we all contribute to narratives with our own stories, large and small. So here's an example of an Instagram post that I did contributing to the stories of AAPI resistance that I inherited. Here's a story of my grandmother, who was a master sewer and knitter. She resisted bound feet, wartime occupiers, famine, and economic ruin. She also smiled for photos, even when no one else did. So I recently took up these principles, and I'm currently applying them to a project I'm working on now with communities of opportunity. And our charge for this project is to, build a fellowship for narrative power building, specifically focused on solidarity economy principles. So in forming this work, we wanted to work with the thorny challenge of differentiating between storytelling and narrative. We felt it was a fallacy when people say, all I need to do is just get my story out there or tell more stories from people from the movement, and then that'll make a difference. So I worked on developing a narrative schema that is flexible enough for multiple people to, create parallels to their own work and their own research, their own storytelling and organizing, and narrative launch. So that's what I'd like to share with you today. And I really took inspiration from the narrative house. This is a schema a schema is basically a knowledge structure that allows you to interpret and understand the world Frameworks can be a little bit more rigid, but schemas are a bit more dynamic and subject to revision. So this narrative house is a schema that was developed for reparations storytelling. And I encourage you to check it out at reparationsnarrativelab.org. So this is a schema I'm going to be talking about today. It's called the narrative garment. So like any narrative project, we start with visioning and designing. We think about what is our ideal vision of what we'd like to achieve. What kind of experience do we want to invoke? How does it feel? How does it move? Who are we designing for? And what have they asked for? So this can happen through, community engagement or focus group session, but it doesn't mean that the designer is impartial or just kind of standing on the sideline. They're lending their point of view of the world and what they think would work. And then next is observation. So what I like about the way to explain this way to create narrative is that observation is an essential element. So any intentional narrative setting project needs to start first with observing or intuiting the space that you're currently in and generally how things work. So if we start with the dressmaker's dummy, we know that there are certain forms, how the neck flows into the shoulder, how the waist leads to the hips, the room that you need in the shoulder in order to allow movement, right? So similarly, there are known forms that a narrative can take place in. So I kind of divide these out into a few different categories. We know about creative. We know about what it takes for what is something new and fresh, what is meeting the current need and what's in the zeitgeist. In terms of societal movements, we know about how political campaigns work, how laws are passed. For psychological, how people change their mind, cognitive and confirmation biases, principles of trust. And for technical, how is information shared and what is the attention span and our audience and their values and needs met? And promotion, how do we get the content out there? So these are not necessarily obstacles to work against. They're just kind of known forms that a narrative must work around in order to be created. So most garments are made using patterns. So that's a way to think about how all these pieces fit together to form the ultimate garment. So these pieces are each cut, they're crafted carefully. And similarly, storytelling is also a craft. So we need to, storytelling needs to be done carefully in order to ensure ethical storytelling and shaped in the right way to ensure that you're grabbing people's attention. So a pure storytelling campaign essentially creates some of these really great pieces, but storytelling on its own is like having just a sleeve or just a waistband or just the straps. It needs to be fitted together in order to form a narrative, in order to ultimately be more powerful. So pattern pieces can also follow some known forms, and these are some of stories' known forms. So just like a cuff looks like a cuff, a sleeve looks like a sleeve, stories also follow similar patterns that kind of click in with humans because they know what to expect. So a familiar pattern of a story is like its hero's journey that's been ingrained since mythical times. There's a story of David and Goliath, a seemingly powerful but clever person. Powerless. There's a story of community barn raising, a bunch of people coming together through commitment and collective strength. There's a story of how a group of Avengers all come together with different talents, and they come together to defeat a common enemy. And there's the story of a group of young, passionate, talented people who rise up against corruption. But just like when you're designing something, you don't necessarily have to follow the patterns of existing stories. These are just guidelines from traditional storytelling that are already there if you want to alter and shape as you want to, and cut and shape something entirely new. So anyone who knows a seamstress or has seen them work, they know that stitching together garments takes an immense amount of skill. So now we come to stitching together, which is the work of organizing around a cohesive narrative. So people come together with their different stories, and the stitches represent that coalition building, the co-fundraising, the intentional communication strategy, all working together towards the North Star, and to make a complete narrative that is finally making an impression on the world. So as we sew, we think about how much tension needs to be held between the two pieces. We think about the types of stitches that are the most forgiving and the most firm, how it interacts with the body and the usage of the garment, right? So we use pins to temporarily hold pieces together until we can formally stitch them together. And sometimes we take out stitches and need to start all over again because something just isn't fitting. So here are some of the things that stories need to be stitched together by. The coalition building, the rowing in the same direction towards narrative power building, finding builders to ally with, the organizing of staffing and training, funding of coalition members, there's the capacity building, the DEI training and commitment, the funding of offensive and defensive communication strategies, the digital infrastructure and budget, and brand work. So as we're judging our own organizing power, we need to be aware that practice increases skill. So if something fails, maybe it's because we did it for the first time. And maybe the first thing we should create should be something really easy, like the equivalent of a sack dress. But we need to keep on doing that work, that stitching work, in order to become practiced at it and not give up on the first try just because we messed up a little bit. So when we have our complete garment, it's ready to go out in the world and to be taken in by the public. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. We need to ask ourselves, what is the experience of the wearer? What sort of impression does it make? Does it make people think that it's fancy or comfy or cutting edge or funny? The equivalent of what people's impression would be of a garment, that we need to take into account people's impression of that narrative. And once it's ready, it can be duplicated and scaled up or even mass produced and become a dominant public narrative. So I really like this quote from Rashad Robinson at Color of Change. Narrative power is not merely the presence of our issues or issue frames on the front page. Rather, it's the ability to make that presence powerful, to be able to achieve presence in the way that forces change in decision-making and in the status quo. So here's an overview of the narrative garment schema process, starting over on step 1, visioning and designing your narrative. Step 2, observing and measuring to know the landscape in which you want that narrative to take place. Number 3 is piece cutting and shaping. This is your storytelling or collection of stories. Number 4 is stitching. You're doing coalition building, you're doing narrative power training, and there's a coalescence involved. And number 5, that's the narrative development, the sharing, iteration, and duplication of your narrative. So what I would love to get out of this presentation is socialization. I know that talking about narrative is just as important as getting it into place, because if that conversation doesn't start, it doesn't go anywhere. So I want to make sure that talking about narrative is graspable, it's actionable, and it's buildable for everybody. So the schema has roots in the work of so many unsung heroes, mainly immigrant women who work with their hands. And I feel like some of that culturally bound narrative work that they do so effortlessly is something that we can work to recapture and relearn to create more positive change through our work. So don't gatekeep, open up more conversations at the highest levels with funders to start, fund and carry out narrative projects, and many of them in a mission to accelerate social progress. So thank you so much. That's it for my presentation, but here's my contact information if you'd like to reach out with any questions, if you'd like to brainstorm your next narrative project, I'm here for you. Thanks so much.
So much, Sian. Thank you so much again for this very wonderful overview of how to think about narratives and kind of your model of stitching them together. I've seen an earlier version, but this is like so expansive and so thoughtful. And I really appreciate your kind of perspective of not just thinking through storytelling as a singular organizational act, but a socialized and collaborative act. And thinking through that, I think matters more than ever. And I think, yes, we are getting some feedback also from our audience. They appreciated the kind of the metaphor, but also focus on solutions and thinking through about how to kind of think through narratives together. So at this point, I want to invite also Melissa and Bea back to our conversation too. We have a number of questions from the audience that has been coming in, and Anita and I will try to kind of to Cyan's earlier perspective or discussion, stitch them together and so that we do due diligence to so many, again, interaction and thoughtful ways in which our audience, are trying to think with us and make sense of this moment and what matters now for communication and marketing professionals with your company, with your insights. Anita, if you want to, we can just start kind of asking questions. We're going to ask a few to all of you, and then a few specifically to each one of you to kind of capture. Again, Anita and I have been trying to go over the questions that our wonderful audience members, our learners, are asking you. So I hope we do them justice. So Anita, do you want to start with maybe a question for everyone?
Yes, we've had a number of questions that have gotten some upvotes, and thanks for people that are adding them on Mentimeter, and please continue to add yours and upvote. But here's one that's a general one. We'll start off for all three of you, which has gotten some upvotes, where they're asking all of you, if you had to pick one skill that's most important for communicators today, what would it be? This is one that gives you a chance to riff a little bit before we get into specificity. Do you want to start, Melissa?
Why? Because I was thinking real hard. One skill.
One skill. Don't overthink it.
Confidence. I think that communicators, people smell vulnerability. Vulnerability is okay, and it's all right to lean on community to get answers. But to be an effective communicator, you kind of gotta put it out there. So I think having confidence that you know your stuff, and that you come from a place of strength goes a long way in communicating with reporters and communicating with your staff, marketing team, their leadership. I think it's a really important skill.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Sian, how about you?
I think it's empathy. So I think it can help with both your internal work with your coworkers as well as understanding audiences. So for communicators, you really need to know you are not your audience. People have different experiences, different values, and being able to know those audiences' values because you spent time with them, you spent time listening, watching their media, reading their blog posts, etc., really helps you to craft a communication strategy that really takes into account a number of different audiences. And then also when you're working with your coworkers and you're a manager and you can speak with empathy and work with people, like understanding their points of view, why they're bringing a certain perspective into a work meeting, that really makes you a great coworker in my mind.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Bea.
Yeah, I'm going to say something that is related to what Zion just said. I was thinking about ability to listen, and we spoke about this in my presentation. Is listen beyond just the ears, right? Is really deeply listen.
Yes.
I think that's really important today.
Absolutely.
Maybe I'll follow up with a question again for this is the top rated question. So I want to kind of also honor our audiences. They all want to hear from all of you again about your perspective on how can businesses and organizations of all kinds rebuild trust in an area of increasing misinformation, skepticism, especially engaging the type of diverse audience pool that all of you have talked about. So, what are steps we can take towards rebuilding trust in this era for our organizations, for what we do to maybe empower our work and make it more visible? Again, this is a question for all of you. Maybe we can start this time, if it's okay, with you, Bea.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think it's a tough task today. Depends on in-depth work, depends on leadership clarity about the vision of the company and how this is going to be built with our audiences. It's a journey. I don't think it's easy. It requires really an intentional perspective and at least the do no harm. Someone spoke about this too. And being genuine and step by step, it's a journey.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is something that we do overnight.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Sian?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one word that stuck out for me that I agree with a lot, Bea, is authenticity. I think that the public has a very strong nose for authenticity right now because of social
Mm-hmm.
media and how unguarded people appear in making their own content. And so when it appears that a company or an organization is doing something in order to get credit, that automatically puts a, you know, suspicion amongst the public. So it's kind of like you need to live your values and carry out responsible actions or do-gooder actions just for that, doing that without an expectation to get credit. If you do get credit later on down the line and it's exposed by someone who's a third party, that is great, and it, you know, speaks a lot more volumes than when you're touting your own achievements. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's kind of like that story of, you know, a policeman gives a homeless person shoes, and someone captures it on video, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is really great! I love this! It's a viral moment." But then if it's exposed that the policeman actually set it up, that a camera was waiting there by their PR department in order to capture that moment on video, all of a sudden people do not like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you really need to make sure that you're capturing moments that are authentic to you without an expectation to get credit at first.
For sure. For sure. I mean, authenticity matters more than ever. And you're totally right, right? Did we intentionally create that content? Or did it actually happen in that moment? Melissa, what about you?
I'm reflecting on that because it's my job to get people credit, but not to stage moments, right? So there's a difference. But I'll carry that forward and say, I think you have to show your work. Part of being authentic is showing your work. Being, Ken, you asked how we rebuild trust. Um, Show the background, show where decisions came from, be ready to be called on the carpet, and have more than 2 or 3 bullet points ready for why something is
Mm-hmm.
important to you. Show the engagement, show the data. It's a press release alone is not effective anymore in movements and in building narratives, and so people really need to invest in that kind of accountability. And demonstrating where these decisions or announcements are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, exactly. And thank you all for your responses. I think it's really capturing the complexities too, right? Of like what a communicator has to navigate, right? Because all the things that you touched upon are really nuanced, to your point, intentional, accountable practices that we all want to see, and we all try to do, but it requires constant, rethinking. And I'm so glad we're able to think at this moment together. I want to turn it over to Anita. Anita, you have the next question.
Yes, and this is a question coming from our audience for Bea and for Melissa. And it's asking, what tips do you have for individuals who want better understanding of their internal communications audience, but they don't necessarily have strong research backgrounds or large budgets to do it? How might you answer that? Melissa, do you want to start? And then we'll hear from Bea.
Sure. I mean, despite the fact that I gave all the caveats for the scary things about town halls, I love them. I love them as a tool. I have had a lot of success doing that with different leaders, and it's really a listen and learn, less talking, more listening, right? And so, in Native communities, they refer to these as listening sessions. It's the idea that you are coming to be present for your community, but I'm talking like 3 to 5 minutes of opening remarks, and then you shut up and you sit there and you hear from different teams. I try to always have a diversity of both lived and professional experience in how we present people for listening sessions. And it's really meant to be, again, much less of a back and forth and really like, I'm here to learn. I do this often with new leaders who are still trying to figure out where the bathroom is, right? Is we take them on the road and we give them a chance to just be available and be present with their community. It's amazing if you give people the opportunity to share with you what you will find. And it's a really good, way to sort of learn directly from your audience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Bea.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Melissa. Of course, I think I'm going to add a perspective that is just like a subset of this. I'm thinking about one super common challenge for people who manage brands internally in companies is seen as like the brand police. I mean, this is not my case as an external consultant, but all big companies that have internal areas And a lot of the changes in the relationship and really understanding how the brand teams can work better with all the audiences they need to work internally is establishing this long-term relationships that is through groups that get together from time to time, that discuss topics, that address topics together. And you can totally change the course of how these teams are seeing and engaging with other audiences internally. And I think this is also for the leadership team with other groups, but also challenges like between marketing and sales and areas like this, right? So establishing this cadence, and again, it's a journey. And I love when you said, Melissa, about confidence. It's also confidence to be vulnerable, right? Feels like a paradox, but in these relationships, you also have to have confidence when you're going to show your vulnerability and really connect with others internally.
Thank you both so much. Again, it's so interesting, and maybe kind of building on that, but actually going into another domain. This next question is for Cyan. A lot of questions are about, we talked a lot about trust and where we find ourselves in, and you talked a lot about narratives and storytelling. In this era of misinformation, disinformation, but also kind of decline in trust in traditional media, right? Or kind of what we would have put in the bucket of media. How do you leverage and share these stories that you're talking about in narratives? Like what outlets remain, and what spaces are there to share stories we create in this kind of more challenged media environment?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a question on how to get that collection of stories out there in a cohesive
Exactly,
narrative.
exactly. Where do we get them out in this moment? When declining trust in media and kind of a fragmentation of audiences, like where do we go with our stories?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that the decline in trust with the media is kind of coincided with the rise of social media storytelling and user generated content and kind of like self storytelling, right? A narrative project, I think, takes all of those different inputs and pieces them together and kind of notices the common things that are in common with all of those, and and that is working towards the goal that you want to achieve. So sometimes it's those stories aren't out there yet; they're living in the community, and you need to have a storyteller to come and interview and create the content, and then put them together on a YouTube channel or a website or something like that, that's kind of like taking in the more ambient stories that may be coming about through the media, but it's all kind of put around a similar frame or packaged in a way where your target audience is understanding the value of interpreting these stories in a different way. So it's not as if can ignore traditional media or anything, because that is very important. They have some of the most resources to do comprehensive storytelling, more so than an individual, even a freelancer or just a public citizen. They're able to fact check, to get to the highest levels of power, to get the data, to do investigations. Like, these are all things that are important to preserve. But a journalist's job is not to create that public narrative,
Mhm.
right? They don't want to put advocacy into their journalism necessarily. So it's your job to notice when those stories are happening and fitting in within your narrative and adding it to your collection and stitching that together with the other kind of public stories, which can be used on funder presentations, or you're going to conferences, or you're kind of collecting them all on a website and pushing it out. So there's various different ways to kind of get those stories within your narrative out to the audience that you want to.
Thank you so much, Cyan. Anita, I know you have the next question.
I do. This is a question again for all, one that's been upvoted on our Q&A, and what the person is looking to hear from all of you is, what's one piece of advice you could give on how to become a better communicator? I'm going to start with Bea.
Yeah, sure. Um, I would talk about listening again. I think it's such a, and again, listening is more than just listening to respond, right? Is listening to really understand the situation and to look for cues where they're not so obvious. Because the communication is this two-way process. So you need to really understand the needs and the aspirations and the desires of the audience for you to be able to respond in a way that resonates with them.
Thanks so much, Bea. Melissa, how about you? One piece of advice on how to become a better communicator.
The students who have taken my class know that when we talk about crisis, there's a method that I teach. And the first two steps both involve stopping and taking a minute. I think that people react too quickly in the moment, and you got to give your brain a minute to sort of catch up. So I think actually forcing yourself, for those who've done emergency response, it's common that they say you got to stop and smoke a cigarette because it takes like not really, right? But you got to give yourself like 3 or 4 minutes to pull yourself together to think about what you want to say. That doesn't mean that every conversation you have, you should wait 3 or 4 minutes, but really to be an effective communicator, I think, pulling off of the idea of being a good listener, you just have to take a minute, pull yourself, give yourself a beat to be able to decide what you want to say, and don't feel rushed beyond your comfort level to have to engage or respond.
Thanks, Melissa. And Sian, you get the final piece of advice.
I mean, I kind of think about my own journey. I think that it's kind of not being afraid to step into spaces that you may be unfamiliar with. And just know that you're going to be learning a lot. So if you kind of surround yourself with like, oh, I know I'm really good at that situation or in this type of project, and you keep on doing those things, you kind of don't know what you don't know. So if you continue to have that learning mindset, surround yourself with people who are from different sectors or different size of organizations, different budgets, and you're actively working on those projects, you will learn a lot, and you will step into your next project with all sorts of different perspective and experience, and you'll be able to say, well, last time I worked on this, and then people will really start to trust you. So I would say just push yourself into growing.
Great advice. All right, Ekin, over to you for the next question.
Yeah, so there is a question about, and I want to ask you all, we are talking about what matters now, and we've all acknowledged that it's a ever-changing world with new conditions all the time. I think the past decade, but the past few years in particular, we've navigated nationally and globally so many changes. And industries are changing too, right? So that's one of the questions too. So with all these ongoing changes, how do you continue to remain prepared? How do you prepare for these changes all the time? We have 3 key leaders and across different organizations, so who also have connected with our community in different ways. So I want to ask you, how do you kind of navigate these changes in your own practice? How do you continue to be prepared for these various changes that impact your work? Maybe we can start with you, Melissa.
I don't know. We're starting with me a lot.
Next, not you. So
it kind of goes to the first answer, right? Sometimes you fake it till you make it. Sometimes you have the confidence to be able to say, I'm going to figure it out, or that's a new technology, or that's a new thing. But I think people. So in the 10 seconds I had to think through this, I'll give you my honest answer. You got to teach. The more I engage with people, the more I'm thinking through the constant trends, right? So for your students who are on, they're getting a front row seat, excuse me, to constantly getting to be pushed and to be thinking. And I think that this universe is evolving so quickly, people have to be paying attention. So it's a little bit of fake it till you make it, and constantly we're all students. And so constantly keep asking questions.
And Sian, you just talked about it. One of the comments was how much they appreciated your comment about pushing yourself to grow, right? Like not like taking the comfort of what you can do, but also exploring what you could do in the near future, or experimenting. So what would you like to say? Like, how do you keep up with all these changes that surrounds your world and continue to be responsive and be prepared? We are thinking about growth. What strategies do you use?
I mean, I think just kind of mentally thinking and regrounding to the place that communications is still all about people. We're still dealing with people. And the pace at which people and humans evolve in communications is actually pretty slow. Like we're actually not even evolved to sit down all day yet. Who has an aching back or a butt hurt right now? Because we're not evolved to be sitting down, even though people have evolved. We've had office-based jobs for a long, long time. When we have anxiety reactions to seeing social media content, that's actually a very old reaction. It's because we are trained to have a nervous system reaction when we see threatening content. And that's something that we have not evolved out of. It's still very ancient. So I see like new tools like AI as tools, as just tools. It's like we're learning how to use these different tools, but fundamentally we're still the same. And the pace at which we're able to evolve and grow is actually pretty slow. So it takes some comfort to know that we still can communicate with people in the same basic ways that we always have been.
Thank you so much. Yes, we should not. Sometimes we forget in the amidst all the technological changes, also that certain as we started the conversation with talking to people, making conversation or some fundamental things we've always done still resonate and continue in our most basic and everyday communication structure. So reminding ourselves that is really important because they don't disappear when we introduce novelties. Thank you so much for that, Sian. Bea, last but not least, what do you think? How do you stay in tune and up to date with all the changes that are going around?
Yeah, first of all, I have to say that I loved what Zion brought up. It's such an interesting thing for us to think about, right? I think it's a little bit of what Melissa said too. I try to stay calm and have the confidence that we'll figure it out. I dedicate myself to what I do. I have a great team. I think being surrounded by excellent people helps a lot. And we have to just think, like, in a way it's hard, but we cannot just be negative all the time, right? We need to think about the solutions. We need to think about how we're going to overcome some things together and just think through the challenges. And I'm a believer that doing this with a group of people is always going to be better.
Thank you so much. Anita, I think we've covered a lot of bases of our questions, and I know that our speakers have been engaged with us for a while, and so many inspiring moments today. Again, I love this event for the chance for all of us to learn together. For me, but personally, for me to learn from brilliant individuals who are really doing thoughtful work out there, and again, all around the country too. Again, I've really appreciated that our speakers are all around the country leading practice and thinking through, and they've allowed us to think about what matters now, to think about what to focus on, and kind of maybe set an agenda. So I want to just say quickly, and then I know Anita will too. I really appreciated your research, and I will continue to, of course, as always, think with you. But your methodology, I think, of understanding audiences, understanding their values, and incorporating them into campaigns, not directly, but also maybe just tapping into the values that they think about. That is more maybe holistic and resonates with broader audiences than one population is really important at this moment, but also spending that in time and intentionality understanding audiences, to your point through and through about listening to those audiences as part of our branding initiatives. Thank you for that. That was really important for me. And Melissa, I think it's so important, right, to I think amidst all the crises that you navigate for our world, but we all navigate internally and externally, we often we do not pause enough to say, hey, wait, what does everyone here think about, right? And we sometimes, think about external communication a bit more than internal. And the ways in which you recommended us to not just build systems, which I again, with all your talks, I have papers filled with notes, but then also creating mechanisms of kind of making sure that those internal structures are working, resonating, right? Because it's a conversation. And if no one wants to listen, what can we do? And Cyan, narratives at this moment, right? Stitching together. How can we collaborate and socialize? I mean, we are all telling so many powerful stories, maybe, but maybe if we were to tell them together and stitch them together, we are able to create more impact, more change, more social change. And I know this is very much at the core of your work. I am. We have a few more final notes, but I want to dedicate this time to thanking you so much for giving us so much to think about and a direction to move forward. Anita, what do you think?
Absolutely. I sent an email last night to all of you, and in it I said that when we were reviewing the trust barometer, it became so clear to me that all three of you were going to be offering empirical evidence for how we could actually build trust more deliberately, and that each one of you was going to be offering ways that we can mitigate and transform the more sobering message of the trust barometer in ways that are actionable, as Ekin said, creative, that spark a certain level of curiosity. And I just appreciated so much being able to move from JJ's presentation to learn from each of you, and the way that, as Ekin has so well summarized, each of you is leaving us with opportunities to rethink and to rebuild trust in ways that are actionable and long lasting. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for this conversation.
And on behalf of our audience, too, one of our audience members shared in the comments that in a time where it feels like trust and community are eroding, it's so good to be back at this community. Thank you for all all the presenters for their insights, and everyone saying in the comments how inspired and motivated they are, and how this space is maybe a path forward, one of many, of course, a step towards a path forward as we try to come together and make sense of it all. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you,
Absolutely.
and thank you, Cyan, for your time. Next up, I just want to do more thanks. I want to, again, as we explore this topic, what's an idea that resonated with our speakers who are leaders in their field about marketing and communications as we evaluated trust? We did it not alone. The reason that you see such a well produced event is because this is an applied learning opportunity in our master's program too. We leverage our communities to explore, experiment, interact. Anita, as you know, one of our classes, one of our practicum classes on live streaming, have produced this class. And yes, they're here. Well, let's congratulate you for this wonderful opportunity and for creating a vessel for national and global communities to learn about what matters in communication and marketing right now. Thank you for all your work. We really, really, really appreciate it. I hope that this was also a learning opportunity for you all.
And we can also just mention quickly, Ekin, that it's taught by an alum of our program. So it's just really exciting to have that kind of virtuous cycle of students who then inform our curriculum and then come back and teach. And so really thrilled to have this be an example of the expansiveness of the CommLead community and the way that our alums engage with the program well beyond their time as students.
Oh, exactly. And I think it's a testament to the type of community that we're trying to create. We have a really strong master's program community, alumni, students, faculty, but with events like Connects, and we're trying to grow more opportunities. We're trying to bring together global communication and marketing professionals with us to form community, to reflect, to think, to read, to make sense of it all together. Not only if you're a part of our master's program, and I got to see so many alumni comments, so welcome back to many of you. Welcome to those of you who joined us for the first time. Again, we have a really vibrant information and learning community that you can follow on LinkedIn, Communication Leadership at University of Washington. And if you're inspired today, and if you want to kind of join us to our master's program, I want to share, has its one of its final application cycles coming up in about a month. April 1st is when you can apply. You can still apply for our master's program. The program starts in fall, in person in Seattle, and we have multiple degree options for communication and marketing professionals, even if you're early in your career or later in your career. Intentional programming taught by faculty. Today's program included 2 faculty, Melissa and Cyan, and 1 alum, Bea, and 1 advisory board member, Jonathan, JJ, and the 2 of us whose life has been dedicated to serving this amazing community we love and cherish. Also, I want to mention one more opportunity. Beyond our master's program, we've been starting to create ways for you to learn with us online as well. We've been creating standalone courses for our alumni, for those of you who may be not in Seattle, all around the world, to learn about how to navigate this moment with the newest tools. Retraining was one of the most important aspects that kept coming up in our presentations. So starting on May 5th, again, the second time we're offering this class, it was widely popular when it was offered in fall, taught by our master's programs, our award-winning master's program at one of the top universities in the world. We're offering a course called Empowering Marketing and Communications with AI. It's a 7-week immersion. The course content is online, but those participants, those who enroll for the course, the standalone course, can also have in online connection sessions and connect with the faculty. It's amazingly and intentionally designed. It starts on May 5th, so you can register for it, and those who complete also get a certification recognizing their completion of this really valuable course, badges, all of that. So it's an amazing opportunity. If you don't have the time to kind of think through, or if you've already completed the master's program and want to continue learning with us, that's something coming up. Anita, but we also have ways of kind of continuing this learning with our audience. I know you want to mention a bit about how to continue thinking with us.
Absolutely. I mentioned it a bit in the beginning, and I'll just reiterate that we have a wonderful mini syllabus. We really see Connects as a continuing learning opportunity, and the syllabus was put together with care. You have readings, podcasts, videos and book recommendations that are really going to underscore some of the teachings that you heard today from our speakers. And so by all means, engage with it, follow those links, read, learn, expand. And I think you'll find that it deepens the kind of conversations and teachings that we had today.
Exactly. And again, if you were once a student, time for some homework again. If you're a student now, time to read more. If you're not a student yet, lifelong learning is for all of us. We try to inspire you to continue thinking through and engaging with this content. Final reminder for those of you who are watching us either live or will watch this recording, please scan this code, and it's also in the mini syllabus. There's a link for a reflection activity about each of the bit, and if you can't scan the QR code, there's a link on the mini syllabus as well, and we'll share these links with all the registered participants later today and tomorrow. So upon completing the reflection activity by March 14th, so make sure to watch, or completely watch the whole session by that date. And when you answer the questions, you'll receive a UW Learning Badge issued by our program and the university that you can again display across platforms that recognizes your learning beyond again your day-to-day. And we want to make sure that we appreciate you joining us today and giving you a space also not just to read but to reflect. That's really, really important for us. I want to thank my co-host, Anita Werner-Kraus, for the masterful way of navigating so much information. I need to stay silent, that break that Melissa talked about, to kind of take it all in. I want to reflect on this for you all too in the coming days, but I need to digest all that I've learned today, Anita.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your just impeccable hosting and coordination. As you said, this is the 7th or 8th Connects, and you bring an energy, a verve, and an intelligence to this conversation that is just a joy to engage with. This was such a pleasure to have this conversation with you, but with all of our speakers and all of our guests watching. Whether you're here in this country or with our global community, it has just been terrific.
Exactly. We look forward to continuing learning with you, thinking with you. Again, I'm Ekin, the Director of Communication Leadership Master's Program at University of Washington. Continue following Communication Leadership Community for suggestions, open to public events. We see ourselves as a public platform. We really, really appreciate all of you here, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you for tuning in for Connects 2025, what matters now for marketing and communication professionals. Thank you all.
Thank you.